Well, with non-human characters entering the spectrum of the killer roster in the entity's realm making their debut, well, let's just say Dead by Daylight had widened their horizons to a few more possible candidates. But before we start jumping the shark and deciding we want to have Ripley facing off against the Xenomorph from Alien or the Death Angels from A Quiet Place using echolocation to hunt down their prey, but there are still mostly humanoid creatures that are very much eligible to work for the entity. So I'm sure some of you clicking on this thumbnail will come with a comment or two saying something predictable. A lot of people will make the argument that we already have the clown to fill the chlorophobia category, and that having another clown wouldn't make much sense. Now, despite already having a clown, Kenneth Jeffrey Hawk Chase was just a normal man with some finesse at whipping together a knockout tonic and a fascination with the severed fingers of his victims, using the visor of a clown during his time with the traveling circus to lure in victims. Jeffrey was limited to his basic human traits, and just another psychopath donning face paint, most likely inspired by the real-life killer John Wayne Gacy. However, that's where the similarities between him and this next clown start to dissipate. It's time to look at the shapeshifting, fear-manipulating, turtle-battling, flesh-devouring, red balloon-carrying, my what big teeth you have having clown from the Macroverse himself. We are here today to discuss why Pennywise, aka It, should be a killer in Dead by Daylight.
Time to float on every nightmare you've ever had. I am your worst dream come true.
I'm not afraid.
You will be. You'll see only what your little mind can allow. For if you stay, you'll lose your little mind.
Before discussing what we will call the Deadlights, not the clown, the Deadlights' role into the entity's realm, we have to discuss why the entity would even conceive of either luring or willing him away from the town of Derry. And unlike my last synopsis with the slasher doll Chucky, things are a bit more complicated and kind of convoluted. In the furthest reaches of dark space, there is a void that leads to a veritable different dimension known as the Macroverse. What exactly is the Macroverse? Well, upon further inspection of the Stephen King Wiki, this is what I found. Yeah, pretty informative, but through Stephen King's literature, specifically the Dark Tower series, a being known as Gan, who is basically King's version of God, created the grand cosmos, who may also be the omnipotent being the other. When it spawned within the Macroverse, he was born as a creature known as the Deadlight. Deadlights are omnipotent beings that, if shown in their true form, will either cause the witness to die outright or become permanently insane, and these Deadlights survive off the life essence of other beings. It faced off against the other, and another being of power was born known as the Turtle, the mortal enemy of It. The Turtle was a creature of creation and rejuvenation, while It was a being of destruction and death. Through unknown circumstances, It was catapulted towards Earth and slammed upon its surface with the force of a small meteorite. The location would be the eventual site of the town of Derry, Maine. Going into a slumber from this great impact, he would not awaken until humans began to colonize the North American landscape in the early 1700s. He would begin a hibernation cycle where every 27 years he would awaken and recklessly consume the flesh of humans by preying on their fears for the span of 3 years. His hunger at first was so overwhelming that in the time period between 1740 to 1743, 300 settlers from the Derry Township mysteriously vanished, where most people, under the influence of its mental powers, assumed that they all just packed up and moved on or were killed by Native Americans. Over the century, this cycle would continue to varying degrees, where he would sometimes awaken from his slumber if acts of murder occur, including the explosion of the Kitchener Ironworks plant during Easter, a racist organization attacking a black nightclub, and a mob pursuing and killing murderers. It would refine his eating rituals, specifically targeting children between tragedies since they were so much easier to scare, while manipulating the adults of the town to be complacent or help him in his devouring, showing us the potential of its mental control powers. He can manipulate manipulate and stoke the fears of any human with a variety of otherworldly powers like shape-shifting, illusionary physical imagery, telepathic mind reading to gauge how his victims are feeling, and knowing what they're thinking. He can trap the souls of his victims eternally into deadlights, can will himself to have superhuman strength and speed, make himself and his actions only visible and audible to those he wants to antagonize, control the minds of many people to either be complacent or work for him, can teleport his body at will, telekinesis to manipulate objects from afar, and worse off yet, a general sense of invincibility if he faces off against an individual that is completely scared of him, being even able to take blows to the head with ease as long as he has time to regenerate. Taking on the form of a clown called Pennywise was most likely to lure children into a false sense of security, as clowns were generally never considered horrific before the advent of King's It novel or the real-life murders of John Wayne Gacy, except for those who were dealing with the scientific term of coulrophobia. To the young, he had seemed like a fun, cheerful personality with promises of circuses, popcorn, and candy, even creating the illusion of the smells and sounds, and then, when they get close enough, bared his fangs to attack and kill. Pennywise would progressively isolate, tap into the fears and minds of his victims, and proceed to kill and consume them periodically. That was until he met with the Losers Club, where as individuals, he would strike fear into all of their hearts, not always killing them or the people of Derry right away, but chipping away at their sanity over time to make their flesh more savory. As he described, any human that was full of fear, they tasted so much better, by either thematically torturing them by manifesting the world in his shape to be tailor-made to their phobias, such as a leper to antagonize the germaphobe Eddie, or becoming a werewolf to the comical Richie, or subliminally controlling people in their lives to either kill for him, like Henry Bowers killing his father, or reinforce their fears, like Eddie and his overprotective mother, or Beverly and her sexually abusive father. Either way, he would use anything and everything to scare them into submission or kill those who would suppress his feeding, all while seeing himself as an indestructible god, considering no one person ever stood up against their deepest, darkest fears in the 3 centuries he was on Earth. However, if you have seen the movies or read the book, all it took to kick that freaky-ass clown down the drain was a few kids who banded together to conquer their fears and use the power of imagination. Without the blanket of fear oppressing a person, they can physically strike back at him, weakening him, but more so, if an individual believes they know his weaknesses, they can will it to being true, such as using silver to harm him, since he could take the form of a werewolf, or being weak to sunlight as a vampire. This is because Pennywise is restricted to obey the laws of the forms he takes, since his whole shtick involves whatever the person believes, and if a person even half believes, his power over them will be mostly diminished. While the Losers Club in their adolescence were able to take him down, they were not successful in killing it outright, allowing him to regenerate and hibernate for his next 27-year cycle, and eventually restart his feeding ritual, only to be defeated again by the adult versions of the Losers Club decades later. So it's no question with Pennywise's kill count, craving fear-ridden flesh, and overall torturous grip on the minds of his victims that the entity would reach out and try to bargain with him. However, Pennywise being an interdimensional being of godly power and being a deadlight, some may think he would never spend his time doing the bidding of another all-powerful creature. But seeing how the entity can also prey upon the weaknesses of the killers that he brings in, he may be able to coax Pennywise into working for him, either with the promise of never-ending fright-filled survivors to dine upon, or by revealing that the entity knows how easy it would be to eliminate Pennywise, as anything that doesn't fear him and simply wills themselves to have the power to defeat him can, so Pennywise could easily be killed by the entity. Once the fear is gone and the belief of unity and strength is established, Pennywise could be defeated, which plays perfectly into the dynamic of Dead by Daylight's gameplay. So what exactly would Pennywise the Dancing Clown be able to do as a killer, and what kind of abilities would be at his disposal? You can't really give him all the powers I listed earlier, but to some degree, using fear and isolation would be key points in his gameplay mechanics. Which, by the way, these are opinions and suggestions coming up. Oh lord, I'm not saying all of these should be used or even considered, but it's fun to suggest. It's just a fun video. Don't get your clown shoelaces in a knot. Walking around is either the 1990 miniseries version portrayed by Tim Curry or the 2017 feature film version portrayed by Bill Skarsgard. Probably gonna have the 2017 version as a default skin and have the 1990 version as a DLC skin. Him in his base form would have a red balloon hung from his left hand and having a playful white gloved hand on the right that can morph into a jagged werewolf claw for his basic swipe attack or that hairy, sharp spider leg for his fast lunge. His main point will be isolating and spreading fear into the survivors, encouraging others to group together to having a fighting chance. Considering the survivors in the entity's realm have dealt with just about every killer more than a few times, actually being sacrificed or killed by them, Pennywise would play into those fears and attempt to manifest himself as other killers, tricking them at first into believing they will have to act and play in a certain way at the start of each match. So basically, you're gonna see a hag or you're gonna see a Michael Myers and think you're gonna have to play in a completely different manner. Possibly having a mechanic dependent on which killer has killed each survivor the most, or just randomizing which killer they will witness, but everyone will see something completely different. So if people are partied up or in voice chat, we'll be able to communicate that it's Pennywise since they all see something different. Once Pennywise actually hits them for the first time, his illusion will break, and the clown will emerge from the plume of black smoke. Pennywise possibly having the ability to release the balloon in his left hand and leaving it as a placeable floating object that he can remotely leave at will. The balloon itself, considering it is a part of him, can act as a remote small terror radius to full survivors and could even possibly waggle his left hand to cause it to pop from any distance, and if any survivors are within a few meters of the balloon, could cause them to scream, giving away their location. Or the balloon could be popped by the survivors, causing a visual cue to come up where the balloon is popped. Maybe having add-ons for the balloon where if survivors are trying to perform skill checks in its radius will be harder to achieve or slower to finish. The Mori would have Pennywise have a red balloon in front of the survivor, catching their attention, then tapping on their shoulder from behind to have them turn around, and Pennywise laughing, then transforming his mouth into the wicked fanged beast we see here, wildly jumping onto them and sinking his teeth in their neck, ripping them apart, then having the balloon pop as he walks away, wiping the blood from his mouth. Or we could attribute to his more dead light side and have him open his mouth to the light inside as the survivor gazes inside, having their hair turn white and watching their body slump over from seeing his true form. Afterwards, their body will slowly float up into the sky and be stuck in a never-ending floating animation above. Or hell, have him doing his meme dance from the 2017 movie on their dead bodies as a joke after the kill. And of course, we could discern maybe a few perks that would come along with the circus. First off, feed on your fear. An overwhelming sense of fear fills the survivor, knowing if they fail, they will most likely meet their demise. While the survivor is working on a generator by themselves, if they completely fail a skill check and cause the generator to regress, outside of the effect of Hex Ruin, if you have it together with that, they will be marked with the exposed status effect for 3, 6, and 9 seconds, meaning they can be downed in one hit. This effect has a cooldown of 50, 40, and 30 seconds. The next perk, You'll Float 2. The dread of being in the killer's hook causes them to lose hope more and more, even if they can free themselves. While a survivor frees themselves from a hook, their unhooking animation will be slowed down, taking 2, 3, and 4 seconds longer to unhook as they float to the ground. And the last perk, Real Enough for You. The survivor questions what is real and what is an illusion. Whenever the killer's aura is revealed to the survivor, a fake duplicate aura will spawn and move around at the same time randomly on a far part of the map from them, making them question which aura is the true killer. Each rank of the perk increases the number of these illusions from 1 to 2 to 3. If the idea of having Pennywise is still too heinous for you to consider and you really just don't want another clown, remember, it wasn't the only killer in the franchise, as Henry Bowers as the Possessed was able to kill his father, his friends in a deleted scene, and attempted to murder the members of the Losers Club in his childhood and in his adulthood. But with most additions as a side bonus alongside the hypothetical release of Pennywise's own chapter, maybe there could be a map based on the well house that was on Neibolt Street, considering how thematically creepy it is and how the basement, first floor, and second floor could be utilized, or the sewers where it resides having the centerpiece of his domain and the children floating above would be pretty damn cool. As for potential survivors that could enter the fray, Bill Denbrough and Beverly Marsh, the integral parts of the Losers Club as adults, would be perfect to attempt the survival in the entity's realm, with Bill having a vendetta to take on Pennywise for the murder of his brother Georgie, and Pennywise wanting to extinguish Bill for being the rallying cry of the group that defeated him. With It Chapter 2 releasing soon, I am beyond hyped to see how Muschiatti, Mussolini, and Bill Skarsgard finish off this reboot. Let's just hope it doesn't end in a similarly corny way to the 1990 miniseries. What ideas did you like? Did you know about Pennywise's origins as a Deadlight and his hate for turtles? Is it funny to have something called the Deadlight and Dead by Daylight? Which Maury sounds better? Let me know in the comments if you have any other ideas of what it could possibly be capable of, and I will have a poll up eventually on my community tab to decide which horror icon should be analyzed for DBD next. Help the channel out by donating during my live streams or Patreon, and you can be featured on this list here. I'll be at PAX West in Seattle tomorrow all day, so if you're here or there, let's meet up. I'll be dressed as Ellis from Left 4 Dead 2, and I'll be roaming about, and I'd be glad to meet you. As always, I'm Zack Ass, aka Wow Such Gaming. Never forget to float too. You'll float too. You'll float too. You'll stay wow!